And I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. I mean, he used to come pick me up in his pickup, and away we went. And, and I spent hours and hours and hours in that pickup with him as a young child. I mean, I was small. I was standing up on the pickup seat, going around the ranch, listening to him give the guys working hell. And, he didn't hold back because I was there, let me tell you.
I'm Chris Hausworth, a grain originator and accountant living in Pocahontas, Iowa, and you are listening to the Vance Crow Podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm glad you're here. Today is a special interview with a slow-talking retired rancher named Mike Compston. Mike was one of the very first people to join the Articulate Ventures Network, and as you'll hear, when I first met him, I thought, this is kind of an older guy. He just wants to fill his time by joining the network. I have no idea what role he will play. And he has turned into a central figure of the entire network. He is always there to participate in speaking gyms, to talk about his thoughts during Circular Firing Squad, and really to provide feedback and insight that I don't know anyone else can give like he can give. Today's conversation is so interesting. We talk about the inner voice that we have in our heads. We talk about death and what it's like to be looking at the mistakes you've made in the past. He talks about his wife and the religion that they have built together and how they've stayed together and mistakes he's made along the way. Mike really gave of himself during this conversation, and the entire thing gets better and better and better the longer we talk. So I hope that you find this to be an interesting conversation. And if you want to meet people like Mike and have the opportunity to engage with people that will give you real feedback, that will give ideas that you do not yet have, and will participate with you through book clubs and movie nights, then consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network by going to network.articulate.ventures. We talk about the network a few times in the podcast today, and it's one of those things that you may have a little voice in the back of your head that says, hey, this might help me. This might make it easier for me to accomplish this, or give me a chance to meet other people like I know I've been wanting to do. And so if that voice is speaking to you, I hope you'll go check it out and join and become a member. That address again is network.articulate.ventures. Thanks so much for joining me, and I am looking forward to going and talking with my man, Mike Compston. Mike Compston, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to be here, Vance.
So you are a retired rancher, and you were actually, before the show got started, you were telling me the difference between rancher and farmer as kind of the colloquial difference between East and West in the U.S. What is the difference between a farmer and a rancher?
Well, the rancher is, by the accepted definition in the West anyway, is the idea that you have livestock and crop production combined, and they go together in some kind of symbiotic relationship generally. Farming is restricted just to those that do crop production.
So you are a retired rancher and a member of the Articulate Ventures Network. And when you first joined, I thought, here's kind of an older guy. We'll see how well he participates, if he can keep up. But by no means are you keeping up. You're actually setting the pace. You're the first guy to buy a VR headset. You're the first guy to show up to meetings and kind of push the envelope. So where in the world did you come from, and how is retirement treating you?
Well, it's really been my life to be out front. I wanted to be out there as a leader, do things first. Was always encouraged to do that. I think the trust I've developed as a small child growing up had a lot to do with it. So in following in the footsteps of my grandparents and also my parents, they did things. They were proactive, not afraid to venture across a stream carefully. They, usually checked to see how deep the water was. They just didn't dive in. But I think I have a little more of that dive in attitude, and I still have it. I think I'm a little bit surprised I still have it at my age, but it keeps me going, and it's inspiring.
So what is your age? How old are you? I
will be 74 years old on the 30th of November.
And when you look back on, let's say when you were my age, 39, did you imagine you would be who you are 40 years later when you're in your 70s, 30 years later?
No, not really. Actually, when I was your age, 39 years old, we were about to make a major change in our ranching operation because we got caught in the ag crisis of the 80s. It was very difficult economically, and actually that period of time, 39, 40 years old, we sold a lot of what we had as far as ag holdings, and it was a big transition, and I made, changed literally my life as far as what I was doing on a daily basis, as well as going outside and getting work outside and off the family operation.
The farm
I didn't
crisis.
imagine I'd be where I was. I couldn't foresee where I am today. I never really thought about it that much. I just have taken, as life has given me challenges along the way, concentrated on moving forward, picking something that was interesting and something I was capable to do, and pursuing it totally and completely, in order to support my family and also to be personally satisfied.
When you look back on who you were when you were 39 or even younger in your 20s, are you the person that you thought you would be? I mean, like, did you meet the expectations that the voice in the back of your mind had for you?
Yes, I did. I actually did. I don't remember, at least I don't have a recollection of feeling like I hadn't accomplished generally what I had set out to do, and have disappointment as far as self-disappointment, in that it was created by my lack of concentration or setting goals, having the values of trust and so forth to accomplish what that little voice told me I needed to do or wanted to do. That's just the feeling I had as a young person. I was always had set objectives and goals, and they continually moved as I had reached the ones that were set, for short term, medium term, long term. They were always there. I always had those goals. They were set, and that little voice in the back of my head, was telling me, keep going, keep going, keep going. There were plenty of obstacles along the way. I'm not trying to say it wasn't difficult. And sometimes, you had to pick a different route up the mountain, so to speak, to get to where you wanted to go.
Lately I've been thinking a lot about that I have this sensation that I could always be getting better. I could always tighten down my schedule more. I could always be more present. And I recently heard somebody talking about how that can become a vice in and of itself, that the idea that you are not enough or that you could be doing better ends up taking away from the present moment. And I really struggle with this idea because I know I could be doing more in the world, and the only way to get myself out of the position of stopping or the just general inertia of whichever direction I'm going in. And then on the other hand, I find myself being discontent, always imagining that in the future it will be better. Is this something you've struggled with balancing?
Yes, Vance, actually I have, because I go through those periods where I do beat myself up, in that I want to do more. How could I do more? How could I make things better? Especially along the lines of a more worldly view. How can we improve our society as a whole? How can we spread knowledge and wisdom, I think, and understanding, so that we maintain at least a desire in a society to learn and go out there and to seek truth rather than accept that which is repeated continuously and loudly. That seems to be what people grab onto. I've seen that build over actually the last 50 years of my life. Uh, it started in the 60s, early 70s, I think, when it became, at least in my life, that's the period it started in when, I guess it's kind of the stand up, speak out thing. It reminds me of the person that jumps on a soapbox in Hyde Park and gives a speech. That gets up there and no matter what it is, and the crowds got larger in our society, and they became more. I think they became lazy in a way. I don't know if that's the right word, but they started to accept these things and develop some kind of a comfort for it, whether it was really true or if it was some wild idea. And this idea that, I think in one of your previous podcasts, one of the people brought out the idea that, people were looking for something to grab onto and gave them a reason to be alive or a reason to live. And so we end up with these fragmented conditions within a society. We've seen great examples of that lately, and I know myself, and it troubles me. And I want to do things, and the network is a very powerful concept. I struggle with the idea of, and I know you've discussed it and it's been discussed within the network, how big can we get? How many people can we get involved and still be as effective as it is, so that we have this free and open transfer of ideas, the ability to criticize each other with respect, and to discuss it and discuss our differences and understand why we are different, and sit back when we get through with some of our sessions and really analyze what a wonderful thing is that we have differences, that we don't have the monotony of acceptance and confirmation of one ideal.
I agree with that so deeply. And when the Articulate Ventures Network got started, and we were just kind of like, well, what will be the value of this place that's different than just having a Facebook group or some other medium where we can all get together? And the thing that emerged that I really didn't understand people would value as much as everybody does, including myself, is real feedback. I think we've moved into a place in society where conflict is to be avoided, except for by the most extreme people, the ones that are willing to fight and scream, kind of repeat the same mantras that you were talking about. And because everybody else that's not on those poles doesn't want to have that level of conflict, we then get into a cycle where you need conflict in order that you have feedback that tells you, hey, the thing that you're doing, it could be improved. It could have some of the edges rubbed off, or maybe you need to reset the whole frame. But because we're so conflict averse in our PC society that people are wandering around and they go days, weeks, months, maybe even years without anybody really listening to them, because if you can't give somebody feedback, you generally don't listen to them.
Yeah, I totally agree. The network has exceeded my highest expectations, and I see nothing but good to come in the future. We all seem to be expanding it, testing the limits that we have on week to week. That they're not stationary, they're not stagnant, they're moving. We are as a group and as individuals are not afraid to explore outside of what has been accepted last week, that maybe we can push it a little farther this week and, and see what happens. So far, we haven't, at least I haven't experienced any real adversity. I don't think, I haven't noticed that anyone, I don't know if adversity even enters into this at work, man. You know what I'm saying? That concept of adversity? I don't think so.
When you think back in your life about the feedback that you were given that had the most impact on you, who were the people that were saying things that hurt initially, but actually they were right?
The primary ones were family members. They were the alpha males of the group. They were older, German heritage, strong-jawed, intense individuals. But for some reason, they also exhibited the qualities of compassion, caring, and love. And when you combine those with the intensity and the demanding nature of expecting nothing but the best from the person that you're teaching, and to encourage them to explore the cosmos, so to speak, and to let them know that you will be there if they are exploring and they get into an area where they discover that they are fearful or feel insecure, and you push, but still hold the safety net behind them, so that they become more and more and more productive and more educated. And the only thing that I know that created in something that I still have, and when I analyze my own virtues or virtues that I live by and so forth, is trust. The trust that I was taught or learned or acquired, I'm not sure how it all came about, but that has been the one thing that has caused me more discontent and more disappointment, in that I had too much trust in people.
Whoa. I did not expect you to say that. That is super interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, getting into business deals by trusting people that I had been in contact with for a period of years prior to getting into a business arrangement with them, and to my own fault, not making sure that I separated that relationship in making business deals and having legal agreements and documents and everything to cover everything that could, should, or did happen. And it burnt me hard. But what bothers me today is I didn't learn the first time. I didn't learn the second time. And I have this feeling now that I might do it again, because it's not something I seem to be able to recognize and control.
Meaning that you find what people say to be sincere on its face, and you take it for what it's worth, and you haven't been able to transcend it? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
It's really interesting that you're talking about this, because one of the things that my brother impressed on me was that when you start a business arrangement with somebody, one of the most important things is not how will we separate the money that we make, but how will we ultimately separate ourselves when we decide we're not happy with this. And that has been one of those things. It's a little bit like going to your fiance and being like, I want a prenup, right? And in marriage, it's a different thing, right? You don't want an exit plan. But with a business partner, that's what makes it different than a marriage, is that you can establish an exit path. And for me, that's been one of those activities that I've done regularly, but always been reluctant to do it. But it's just been a matter of wisdom that somebody else gave me that I execute.
You know, I totally agree with it. You know, that what Ben said, you know, that's what was needed. How to exit, how to dissolve something that had been created. You know, and truthfully, I can say I don't have enough confidence in myself to right now to say that I wouldn't do it again. I think it's highly unlikely, you know, that I would, but you know, I some of the things that have happened have been a little bit shocking in the last 16 months of my life, but you know, and I'll say probably because I was involved in so many family businesses and trusted family members in other ways, and actually in business or transactions, that although I trusted family as a young person and growing up and created and developed some of my basic values and qualities that I have today, there are family members that are probably the least trustworthy of anyone you'll ever come in contact with.
So one of the things that you've provided in the network is people, there are a lot of entrepreneurs and there are a lot of people that are leaders within their family businesses, maybe not with all the power or all the purse strings, but yet they're expected to make things happen with their family business. What do you think is important for people universally to recognize about family businesses? And not just the negatives of who you can't trust, but generally, how is a family business different than a business partner business?
Well, I think for me, it was the idea that the respect gets in the way sometimes. Respect for each other as family members. The levels of respect at least myself, I had for family members exceeded those I had for those outside of the family. I mean, that's just how it is. When you develop that because of for many reasons as you're growing up or working together, and you know, it makes things more difficult. You want to make decisions. I always had a hard time saying no to my father in particular, because my dad was a lot like me and a lot not like me, both. In some things, he liked to do new things, push the limits, but he also he wasn't as tenacious about that concept. You know, he never attacked it with the intensity I did. But he never wanted to compromise with the rest of us. It was his way or the highway, and it made it very, very difficult on me and extremely difficult for my mom, because for the last 30 years, especially of my life before he passed away, he and I were at each other all the time. We didn't agree, and you know, it got so it didn't happen as often because I got away from the family business as much as I could and did things on the outside. And you know, in the end, we had signed a treaty, and I, you know, pretty much was his caregiver for the last 5 years of his life. And
whoa! So you went from dissolving a business to becoming his caregiver?
Yes.
How was that psychologically?
Uh, for me, very difficult for a while, because I had times caring for him when it was very emotional for me. Uh, it would hit me, and I would feel a bit sad about it because I would realize that there was things that I had missed that I could have been part of. But I was more concerned with the idea that he never really understood me. That to his day of death, he never understood me as a person, who I really was, what my core values were, what drove me, what he just wasn't a person that could wrap his head around the me, because I was so much different than him in some ways. He was a World War II veteran, and I mean, I'm going to say, that when he had come back from the war, I mean, I wasn't alive, of course, but I was told, my mom told me that it really changed my dad a lot. And my dad did not like conflict at all. He probably suffered from PTSD, it was not something that the World War II vets, that he was even recognized, the things that happened.
It's so interesting to me that you say this about there were values that you held that your dad didn't hold, and that was one of the things that separated you two from knowing each other, from him knowing you at least. Where, if your father wasn't the one that gave you these values, where did they come from, and why do you think he couldn't see them?
Well, they came from my grandfather on my mother's side. And he was very different than that side of the family was very different than my dad's side of the family. That's where they came from. And I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. I mean, he used to come pick me up in his pickup, and away we went. And, and I spent hours and hours and hours in that pickup with him as a young child. I mean, I was small. I was standing up on the pickup seat, going around the ranch, listening to him give the guys working hell. And, he didn't hold back because I was there. Let me tell you, I smile about it because I had a good time. And so, here was I, this little 5, 6, 7, 8, 10-year-old boy that, had built up this idea that he was one tough Jose, just like Grandpa, and I was going to stand up for myself. And, I emulated my grandfather. That's what it was.
And as you look back and think that your father didn't understand you, do you think that was something that you could have explained, you could have gotten him to understand, or was this just a riddle that would never be solved?
I definitely think I could have worked on it more and spent time addressing it, which I did not do ever. And that's in retrospect. I mean, I never even thought about that until literally after he was gone. So it's just recently in the last few years.
I mean, this goes along with the concept that is really important to me. And so in the network each month we do a shared experience where we decide, hey, we're going to all work on this one thought that revolves around whatever the theme of the month is. And the theme for next month is liberating a mentor. And we're going to be talking about how the Western concept of finding a mentor is you find somebody that's got all kinds of wisdom, you go sit at their feet, and then they tell you that wisdom and you move on. But in reality, I think that the mentor-mentee relationship is a two-way street, and that in many ways, somebody coming to sit at the feet of a mentor is doing a service, because that mentor then gets to revisit the things in their life that they weren't able to identify when they were in the present moment. And rather than have that be wasted in the sense of, well, I wish I could have done something about it, but I can't. Now you're passing this wisdom on to younger people, because I am so afraid of waking up 5, 10, 15 years from now and being like, why didn't I recognize that as important? And the only way to get woken up is to have somebody mentor you, in my perspective, which is what I see you as.
Well, yeah, and I think mentoring is huge, like you say, and has huge effect on people. But I have observed something that's happened in the last month with a person that I viewed as a young person, less than 30 years old, that I had a lot of respect for and saw going places in a grand way. And this individual changed like mentors. And I mean, I'm looking at this from a distance. And that mentor honed this person into someone that is completely different and that I don't like at all.
Whoa. Okay.
No, I mean, just extracted the good things about her and put new ideas, new values, and new thoughts into her mind that she is now using, and it has changed her so much that it's really ugly. And it was shocking to me. It's something I never thought about, but what the huge effect a mentor is. And you know, it's back to the old idea. I thought about it in the realm of what I was talking about, trust. When you trust someone deeply, you are vulnerable. And the vulnerabilities that a person has can use positively and also negatively.
You know, you're totally right. And that is actually something I had never really grappled with. I've been extremely fortunate, I think, to find mentors that were not trying to overwrite the software that I already had on my mind. They were adding addendums or updates or different things. But, you know, you're exactly right that if you build that relationship of trust, you are letting somebody write on your software. And the challenge is, if you don't let anybody in enough to write the software in your brain, or at least give you an update, then the only model you can use to explore the world is the one you already have. But I had never considered the negative potential there.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, it's the old adage, you talk about rewriting our software. Yes. You know, when you look at that in as far as modeling, computer modeling and those kind of things, building models, you know, garbage in, garbage out, you know, it's what happens. I mean, it's in the same sense, it's the same as a database or a data bank. You know, if it's full of trash, you're going to get more trash. But if it's full of good solid data, you're going to get more good solid data.
Which then that brings me to another concept that I'm very curious about your take on, because you've had so much longer of a span to be thinking about these things. What do you think is news to you? You know, like, what is it that is information that you like say, hey, I need this information in order to operate in the world? Are you watching the major news outlets? Are you reading newspapers? How do you think about what is news?
presently, I'm having a very difficult time with that. I have lost trust in network news for sure. Uh, I'm having more and more difficulty separating news in a sense that finding absolutely pure news, I'm not sure I know where to get it, Vance. I really am having a hard time right now. I can't tell you one source where I can go get real on and feel comfortable that I've got honest news.
Is that different than the past? Did you feel like you
Yes,
had
I
good
mean, and I don't know if it was any better in the past or it's back to that old word trust again. That I had trust in the past that I don't have today. I it seemed more straightforward. My best example, I think, is some of the reporters that covered the Vietnam War, which was a big deal in my lifetime. Affected my generation hugely. And some of the reporters back then, and I don't even remember all their names, probably I thought did a really good job, and it was something I wanted to see because I had a lot of friends over there and knew where they were and what part of the country they were in over there and what was going on. But at that period of time, I trusted that news, trusted those news passes. But from that point on, it seemed to be a slow, continual evolution to more opinionated rhetoric rather than news. I mean, news was the planes hit the Twin Towers and we watched them crash to the ground. That was news. Pure, ugly news. But that is one of the biggest events. I was sitting on the edge of my bed getting ready to go to a conference in Whitefish, Montana with a bunch of dairy marketing regulators, far away from home when that came on TV. And I sat there and watched what was going on and watched the second plane hit. And that was pure, unrestricted news. Now, to find that on a daily basis, very, very difficult.
Yeah, and you had made an observation the other day that blew my mind. We had watched Hunt for the Red October as a movie night, and you made the comparison of the Cold War, where we're at like a nuclear détente with the Soviet Union or Russia, and COVID. And I was shocked by that when you first said it. But the more that I've thought about things through that prism, it really does feel that way, that politicians use it to say, you should be afraid, but be afraid from this angle. And then another politician comes in and says, no, that's not the angle to be afraid from this angle. And all of it almost equals, this is why you should give my party power to be able to fight this existential dread that you have out there on the horizon.
Yeah, and that's very discomforting right now to me and to others in my generation. That very discomforting because we see these similarities. That we have this mind manipulation going on. And it's troubling because, when you look back to the generation before, and the idea that the Hitler's machine and propaganda machine, and, I read a lot of books about the Third Reich and how that all came about in my earlier days, 30, 40 years ago. And still look back as a reference on some of the things that happened. And you know, the young people, those young Nazis that were so wanted to be a part of it so much. And you see the old films of them all cheering and singing and all. They felt like they were enlightened and you know, they thought they were doing good. And it made them feel powerful. And, you know, that was cultivated by a political movement. And, you know, we see these struggles with the different political movements we have going on in the world right now, in the developed countries especially. And it is scary because I don't think we know today which way this seesaw is going to tip.
Yeah, movements, like political movements, are so scary because they show the herd-like nature of human beings. And like you said, when the group is getting together in a herd, it maybe starts off that they come together because they're afraid of something. But then when they start moving as a way of like, well, we have this truth and we need to move that forward to help people get away from the thing that they're afraid of or the thing that is causing all these problems for us. And you start seeing that mob move forward. The faster they move, the scarier it is. And just like you said, like those people that are involved in a movement, and when I say those people, it could just as easily be me. I'm not putting myself above the fray of human behavior. They feel so good about what they're doing. It's no different than a religious movement when you found Jesus or you found some savior. It's no different. You have all that wiring is already in your head. You know,
you're exactly right. And it just brought something back to me, to experience my wife and I had when we were working on a project in France. On the weekend, 2 different weekends. One was a trip to Taizé. Are you familiar with Taizé, where it's the religious place where the primarily Catholic, where all the young people go, and it's a big deal. It's very spiritual and so forth. It's very upbeat. But anyway, we went there and visited there, and you know, we did some praying and so forth, and experienced it, not when there was huge numbers of people there, but young people from all over the world go there. And then on another weekend, we go to this farm festival we were looking at, and we were with a young French person and another American young lady, and we went to, but let's go this weekend. So we're going down these little narrow streets where a Volkswagen Golf is about all you could get down through it. You know, that's what they're like. And we get to this farm festival, and we're there, and we're, you know, think, wow, this is a little different. You know, what's going on here? And we, you know, are there an hour or so, and realize that we are right in the middle of Communist Party rally.
What is that like? What is going on that tells
farm festival? You know, it was so bizarre. I can't really describe it. Very upbeat, very positive. You know, everybody's excited and singing and dancing, but everything about it was around, you know, as you clean the dust off the top of the table, you realize what was underneath there, you know. Strange. Strange. That's all I can say.
Yeah, and for an American to look at people singing and dancing and happily heralding the ideas of communism, when you juxtapose that about what happened in the Soviet Union and millions upon 60 million people dead as a result of trying to enact that into the world, it's like going to what would feel like the equivalent of a witchcraft, like a seance or something.
Right. From this American point of view, that's what we felt like. And, once we realized that we just, we couldn't get out of there fast enough. It was, all of a sudden you felt like, wow, maybe we're not very secure here. You realize you're pretty small and you're just this little person that, could disappear in the alleys of some little country town in France. When they realize that somebody views you as a I
mean, I know this feeling entirely. When you finally realize, when you're out traveling, that you've gotten past the sheen of tourism and you've gotten into the place where you are somewhere where people may not want you and you are not a part of them. And it's one of those things that when you're just a tourist, you're just traveling around on your, over a week, it maybe happens every once in a while. You stumble into a dark alley. But when you're living somewhere, you can get this feeling of like, oh, I know this. I know these people. I know this place. And you can stumble into places where all of a sudden you realize, I am insignificant. I could be gone and no one will come looking for me. I just disappear. And maybe there would be some kind of inquiry, but I'd already be gone. And that's a sensation that doesn't happen when I'm living in St. Louis, Missouri.
Well, yeah, Vance, and I'll give you another example that my wife and I lived through. We were traveling in South America, and we were with a group of seed stock cattle producers in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And anyway, we went busloads out to this livestock auction yard, and we're attending an auction there. And my wife and I, being part of a group, but individuals within the group, got to talking to some young people, which we always wanted. I'm still drawn to young people, as you know, and like to talk to them. So we're off talking to them and having great conversations and learning a lot more than just the barista kind of a thing. So anyway, we get to looking around, and there is nobody from our group to be seen. And we're about 60 miles from our hotel out in the country. And at that time, there was armed guards on every intersection in Argentina. It was a little bit, during one of their periods of unrest and change of leadership and all the other great things. And, inflation was something like 1,400%, and you couldn't carry enough money to buy a Big Mac, in a suitcase. But anyhow, so here we are, way out in the country. No car, no way to get back. Don't have a clue how to get back.
No cell phones.
No cell phones. So they load us in this Volkswagen and they'll say, we'll take you back. So we knew what our hotel was. So we're in this car and shoved in the back seat of this little Volkswagen Golf. And my wife and I were going down the road. And I was whispering, like, we have no idea which direction we're going. We don't know whether we're going farther away or closer to town, just like you said. Luckily, it was all great, and they were good young people, but it was risky.
Yeah, there are moments in my life where I've had those revelations where you're in a cab and I've been having a good conversation with the cabbie, and all of a sudden I realize, well, I've actually told this guy quite a bit about myself without realizing that I don't actually know what he wants or what his intents are. Or one of my experiences was I went to a cricket match. And I was having a great time, and I had met these guys that were really worldly, and they wanted to go to another bar, and so we do. And they're buying me drinks, and I am just having a blast being like, oh, they must like me so much. They keep buying me drinks. And there was some voice in the back of my head that was like, hey, maybe you ought to quit drinking with these people you don't know. And I remember just being like, I need to leave right now. And I've always looked back on that time and been like, maybe that would have been a story worth telling. It would have been fun. But I promptly left because I was like, something's not right here. And I always wonder what would have happened had I not done that. But I have this sneaking suspicion that they were up to no good.
You know, and that brings up another point is, you know, wise people listen to that little voice inside of you. You know, I really believe that. I mean, it never, I've never been wrong when I listened. I've almost 100% been wrong when I didn't listen to that inner voice.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about when that voice speaks to you, right? It's like in moments of danger. Sometimes it's in moments of ecstasy and happiness that's like trying to bring you back down. Do you have a way to be able to commune with that voice that we're talking about?
You know, I used to argue with it, you know, and say, no, you're wrong, you know, in talking to that little voice. And it took a few whacks up inside the head to, you know, make me realize that I probably shouldn't be arguing with myself, you know, and you'd be a whole lot better off if you listened. And that was a bit of a monumental transition for me, because I probably spent 20 years in the arguing mode.
It's interesting to think about why that voice feels distinct from you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have control over that voice. I can't tell it what I want. I can't tell it what I want it to be getting me towards. I have no control over it. And yet it is only in me. So who the hell is that voice? Is it God? Is it the other half of me? Like, what is it?
It's the, you know, I think it's the grand culmination of all your values. I think it's all your values, known and unknown, in that voice.
That's a very interesting thought. That's a very interesting thought. And then the question becomes, you know, you encounter many, many values, right, throughout life. You could encounter the values that are not good for you to have, but it does seem like there is an intrinsic goodness in the voice. At least that's the way I maybe that's thinking too highly of myself, but I feel like my voice has been able to discern the values I should have versus the values that I'm drawn to.
I'd have to agree with that. And I never really thought of it that way, but I agree with that. It's the good. It's not just the values, it's the good values.
Have you had to deal with addictions or vices that were difficult for you?
Smoking cigarettes.
Oh, I did that. Why'd you start smoking?
Because my friends did, I think. I started when I was 17, 18 years old. And I quit when I was 70.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Are you worried there's a price to be paid with like lung cancer just sitting around the corner for you?
Yeah. I mean, I go to a doctor and get examined every year and have a CT scan in my lungs. About 10 years ago, there was a dark spot about the size of a dime on one of my lungs. Showed up in an x-ray and scared the hell out of me. And I didn't even quit then. I mean, that's how stupid I was. Or addicted I was.
What prompted you to quit?
You know, I tried all the things, you know, that are supposed to help you. None of them worked.
The
None of them worked.
patches, the gum, the
Right. I mean, I was, you know, and then I thought, well, I'm gonna use chewing tobacco, so I've got my lip full of Copenhagen and a cigarette in my mouth. So you know that didn't work. I'm getting a double shot. But anyway, one day I just said, I'm quitting. I just quit. Boom. I said, no more. I'm going to do this. I'm done. I'm going to die. It's going to kill me. It isn't yet, but it's going to. You know, and anyway, was going to the doctor. I had this appointment with the doctor because they thought I was having some problems with sleep apnea. My family practitioner thought I needed to go and have that checked out, which I didn't. But then, I go to the doctor and he says, well, you're starting to show signs of mild COPD, blah, blah, blah. This is what you're going to do. And, if you want to live long, buddy, you better quit. And today would be a good day. And it was a good day. That was it. I just quit.
It's, when you actually take the time to contemplate death, which is one of those things that I avoid looking at, right? I'll look over here,
right,
I'll look over there, up or down, but when you contemplate death, it ends up for me not being as sad or as scary of an experience as I initially think that it's going to be, right? It does something for truing whatever the things are in my life. Are you capable of thinking clearly or for a long period of time about your impending death?
Oh yes, I'm not afraid of it. And that's because of my Catholic religious beliefs. And I'm not a cradle Catholic. I was a convert that I converted when I started dating my wife a long time ago. But anyway, and really studied it and tried to catch up. Became a Catholic when it was much more traditional and Latin masses, and carried my red missal around, and all those things. And women wore a little lace veil or on their head or a scarf, and it was something that I really got into, because it was a very regimented, very strict. My wife was educated in the Catholic schools all her life. Actually wanted to be a nun. Went to the convent and saw the doors closed behind it and said, hell no, this is not what I want. So, but he's just a very good person too, and it helped me a lot. But anyway, where were we?
Well, the Catholics have, because I grew up Catholic, and actually right now I've been attending Catholic Mass, not because I have some deep belief in God or think that I owe God, a once a week punch card to get to Mass, but because as I'm raising a child, I am really struggling with how will I create the software that gives her inner voice, her daemon, the values that I think are important. And I am afraid that if I try and do it without a church, I will have major problems. I see the flaws in using the church as the software writing system, but I don't necessarily have another better way that transcends 2,000 years of experience. And this is right here, what you're saying makes you not afraid of death, right? So it's an important thing to be considering, whether you should go, or how does this help you align your values, or what does it mean for when we die?
That's, I will say, the one thing that it makes me is I'm not fearful of death. I think that is the most important part of what I got out of my religion and still get out of my religion. And going to mass virtually every Sunday, and and listening to a Catholic mass that's coming out of the heartland, and on television, it's fantastic. Good homily, something that's supportive, something to really think about. I think more so now that I'm older. I pay much more attention to it than I maybe did for the mid period between my period of becoming a Catholic. There was a lull, so to speak, somewhere in the middle, that I wasn't quite as intense about the religion itself. Not any less a believer, but just less a participant.
So what do you think happens when you die?
Well, I believe in reincarnation and in the spirit, ascend into the heavens, and that I will see and join my family there.
Can you imagine this as architecture? Is this palaces? Is this a place covered with clouds? Is it ethereal and there is no need for space?
I imagine it to be a peaceful, humble, simple, plain environment. There's no dullness about it, but there's no brightness. It's in some area between there.
And do you concern yourself with the thoughts of hell?
Oh, yes. And the people that I don't meet, and I hope I end up in heaven, if I don't meet them in heaven, I'm going to be damn happy that those ones I don't see are in hell. And there's a few that I hope end up there or are already there,
It's interesting in life when you think about the one of the conclusions that I've come to is most of the people that I have the inclination to wish them to go to hell, I think they already, for the most part, are living in hell, right? Like if they've done something so egregious so as to have another soul out there wishing, suffering upon them, then typically, not always, because it could be that the other person is off their rocker, but typically it's because you're not communicating, you're doing things that are distrustful, you are, stealing or breaking the what we think of as whether it's the 10 commandments from God or just the 10 things that allow you to have better relationships with the people you're in contact with. And if you're breaking those rules, you typically are in hell, right? There's not an alcoholic that is living in heaven while in the gutter. It's just that they are in hell.
Well, yeah, I mean, and there's people that, because of their deeds, are, living in hell. That inner voice that we talked about has turned on them, and they are being eaten up from the inside out.
That's right.
I truly believe that.
And if you get at crosswaves with that daemon, with that voice that's telling you what to do, it's unrelenting, and you hear it all the time, which is why people then go get high, or they get super drunk, or they, try and have some adrenaline. I know for me, when I'm trying to drown that thing out, I am willing to use some pretty powerful substances to be able to make it so that way I don't have to hear that voice. But I think that is the path to hell.
Yeah, I agree. I really agree. And my wife and I have been married for almost 54 years. We got married when we were very young, 20 years old. But I will say that she has been my strongest team member, and I have strived to be her strongest team member. And I really believe that now I realize it's something special that we have and have enjoyed. I'm not sure why and how it all came about. I mean, there was some rocky spots along the way, and I misbehaved myself along the way too. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't any angel on a forever basis. I like to think I'm a good person, but I am far from perfect.
What do you think you learned about marriage that men should know in order to have a 50-some-year-odd relationship?
I think the first thing is you can't be selfish. And you can't, you are now one. You and your wife are one. And you have to maintain that focus. You can be individuals, but you can always come together and be one. And maintaining that balance on a daily, hourly, minute basis is very, very important. And you are not going to be able to do everything you want to as an individual. And they are not going to be able to. But in that true relationship, it's very important to support what your partner wants to do or believes in. I mean, you may not agree with it, not at that moment, but most likely if you have that commitment and attraction to your partner and it is strong enough, you are best off supporting what they want.
I'm totally with you on that. And one of the realizations that I've had in the last, 2 years or so is that my wife's daemon, the inner voice that she has in her that speaks up as like pecking at me at the things I should be thinking about or the things I should be doing, is really valuable to learn from. And there's no one else that has as invested of a reason to make sure that I am upright as my wife. And I can see how couples could get sideways where they think, no, that person is keeping me from being the person that I want to be or that I could be. But you got to get that right. Because if you, and the thing that you said at the beginning, which I think is absolutely right, you are one and there is no escape valve. You have made the decision that you guys are together and you have to hold up your end of the bargain on what that means for a commitment. But once you come to that arrangement that you're not going to leave, a whole new level of interaction and support can manifest that can never manifest between, like we talked about earlier, business partners.
Yeah, and I could truly say that the periods of unrest in our relationship were all my fault. Absolutely. I admit it. This is my confession. I confess. And I was a jerk a few times, just an absolute jerk. Men go through some, strange things. There's, face it, we're gonna forever walk down the street and glance over at that pretty woman. You know, that's just the male thing, male female thing. You know, but you maintain the restraint and understanding that yes, you can, you know, enjoy that without going further and without causing problems. You know, it's just, it's not easy sometimes, because if there's things going on at home, you know, that maybe you've been in argument with your spouse or whatever, and then you start drifting and you're not listening to your inner voice, and you maybe got a buddy, or, you know, like you say, you're at the bar or whatever and having a few drinks, and, you know, there's always temptation in all parts of our lives, as you know, man. It's everything we do. I mean, I'm sure there's temptations and days when I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this network thing. This day is so chaotic. I don't have time to do this, you know, and if you don't grab yourself and get back on the road, you're gonna keep drifting, and pretty soon you're gonna hit the shoulder, and then you're gonna roll the car, you know.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've been thinking about these two metaphors that have come up on the podcast. One is the Cain and Abel. Is this, you know, Cain killed Abel because Cain's sacrifices that he was making to God weren't good enough, and he got jealous of Abel's sacrifices, and instead of making the right sacrifices, he went over and killed his brother. And so there's that metaphor. And then you have the Mark Spiewak, the running coach, who was a fascinating interview where he said, hey, a lot of our problems come down to a 3/4 problem. It is that you're 3/4 of the way through the race, and if you could keep yourself going hard, then you will be happy with your thing at the end. And so when you start talking about a marriage or any of the work that we do that's difficult, you always have to have these two models to say, is this a Cain and Abel problem? I'm not making the right sacrifice and I should quit doing what I'm doing and do something else? Or is this a 3/4 problem? I just need to keep going and eventually it'll get easier and there'll be people cheering for me at the end. Does that resonate with what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I enjoyed that, you know, the running coaches comments and podcasts. It rang my bell. I mean, you know, my wife and I discussed it. We watch those things together. I mean, it's interesting because we watch them. We go to our lay in our bed and turn on our TV and sit there before we go to sleep, and they say, okay, does Vance have a new podcast? Well, we throw it up there and we listen to the podcast, and then maybe we back it up and listen to this and back it up and listen to that. And then we discuss it, and then we go to sleep.
Oh man, there's no higher compliment than that to me. That's awesome.
Well, it is. It's just our time, you know, you can focus, and you know, it's really nice, you know.
Mike, I think we're going to wrap up here, but I want to invite you on again and again. This has been a really good conversation, but you know, as always, I really like asking the question on the way out with certain people. What is your Peter Thiel paradox? The thing that you believe that very few people would agree with you on. What's something you believe about the world?
Well, I firmly believe that everyone has abilities that they have not discovered yet. And I think it's my job to teach people or to encourage them to look for who they really are. And I truly believe that, you know, I don't think everybody's going to agree with me that there's a lot of hidden ability out there that isn't expressed, but I'm adamant about it. I just am adamant that it's there.
You know, I think that one of the things I have observed in the way you interact in the network is people put things out into the world. Like Miriam, for example. Miriam Hoffman is a member of the Articulate Ventures Network, and she not only did she just win a national FFA officer role, but she's also giving a speech in a few months for her college. And she put forward her talk, and she got done, and you were like, it wasn't good enough. I know you could do better. And what I think most people would anticipate by saying something like that to another person is that that other person will cry or start looking sad or be like, never mind. But instead, Miriam lit up and she's like taking down notes and trying to make changes and asking questions. And like when you see someone like you have that impact on another person, you realize, wait, I could do that too. I could provide feedback that would allow them to get better. And so I see you living out the thing that you're saying you believe that other people don't agree with. I think that is the mark of a real person, a real man, is to live out the thing that they believe, even though other people don't agree with them.
And by doing that, you become very content. I can truly say that the network has brought me to a place in my life that I have never experienced this level of contentment.
Whoa! All right. I love hearing that.
You know, it's something that, and it's so strange because when I decided to become a member, you know, you were advertising it or asking for the first 15 of us or whatever for your test. And my wife and I, you know, watched the podcast and they said, well, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? All these young people with all their great ideas. And, you know, I'm not sure I'm mentally even in the same game or capable wisdom-wise of even communicating with all you super smart young people. But anyway, but I thought, you know, we looked at each other and said, oh, what the hell? Let's give it a whirl. And I did. And it's been, you know, because there's always been a spot that never got filled that I wanted to do exactly what I'm able to do within this network. And it's strange. There's just a little block in the side of the building that I never got to put in place. But now I have, and it's made me feel very content.
Well, we are all better because you're there, man. And I am really glad you were willing to sit down and have such an open discussion about life and religion and the voice and communism and being lost and vices. This was exceptional.
Well, I wandered a bit, I think. But anyway, it's been fun.
Well, Mike, we'll see you in the network. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.